Hey everybody, how you doing? In this episode, we're gonna do something that's pretty cool, in my opinion. We're gonna try and animate Buck, and not just animating him, but animating his melee combat, and see exactly how our melee scripting tool works, and what is my workflow when I do these kind of animations. So we'll need a few things. First of all, for reference and for timing, I'm gonna open up, it's already open here, I got it already, the Sprider file, the master file for Buck's animations, all of his current animations, whether it's for dialogue or, talking with other characters, looking up, looking down, crouching, walking, running, you get the idea. So, what we're gonna do now is how we take like a basic attack. Like this is from some of you who played the early access version up until now. This is like the first attack that we have. Now we basically rewrote the entire melee editor script to allow for more combinations with weapons and more experimentation and a bit more fluidity. We're currently experimenting with the option to actually add the possibility that you can attack enemies while you're in mid-air. We're still playing around with that, so we might deploy that in a future patch, but we'll need your feedback on it, so let us know what you think of it when it comes out, because we'll definitely give it a shot. Alright, so we're gonna have Unity. We're gonna take the scene that we call Bucky build, which is where I edit anything that changes in Buck's numbers, whether it's his stamina, his health points, his gravity effect, how he's affected by the environment, his friction levels. All of these are here. It's a very complicated amount of processes running on Buck, but we're just focusing today on the melee aspect. Now, the editor is sitting externally to the component of Buck. You can see here. So we've already assigned the weapons and all that. Again, I'm trying to keep these shorter. I'm trying to make this a bit more interesting, so I want to get to the visual part first. Alright, so I'm going to delete those and we're going to make it from scratch. Alright, so now we have no attacks. Let me just make sure that it's clear and that it doesn't break. Alright, so we begin by adding an attack pool. Now, this can be any attack, so the first thing we have to decide is which one. Just to see the effect and how it works, I'm going to try this attack instead, the uppercut, because it looks cool, and I want to try something new that this system could help us accomplish. So, we have the timing of the animation here, which is 700 frames, which is almost a second, and we're going to go to the area where you can imagine that the enemy would need to, already receive the damage, so it's like here somewhere. So I'm gonna go for this, which is on 159 on the keyframes. I'm gonna go into Unity. We'll base that. This indicates that this is an attack that isn't required to be connected to a combo like a previous attack to work. This is like your initiators. So in this option, let's just call it uppercut. Damage type. Currently we have normal damage, which just, staggers enemy backwards. You have the knockback, which knocks them back and plays a different animation. And now we are starting to implement the knock-up animation with a bit more variety. Some of you may have noticed with using the Guzzler, the melee weapon, that you can actually knock them up, but it wasn't really that comfortable, so we're playing around with that to see how we can make the melee a bit more fun to use. I'm gonna add some values. The damage value, the stamina cost, target cost is going to be 2 targets, so if you're going to use this on 3 enemies, it's not going to be as effective because one of them is not going to be knocked up into the air. Hit force is how much they're actually pushed backwards. This is on the X scale, and this is on the Y, so this is upwards, so we're going to do that. That should be fine. Velocity is how much Buck actually moves, because if you can see here, he moves a bit forward when he does the animation, but sometimes, and this is something that's hard to predict with, when you do animations that are completely separate to the game, you don't really know what the result will be, like if it will look good or not. So I asked Emil to add a velocity value that will move Buck forward or upwards, depending on his attack. So if I do like an uppercut, that he actually jumps, then I can add that jumping effect into the combo without it having to, like, you know, interrupt you or in any way collide with the jumping animation that you would like to try and use yourselves. So the velocity frame is when the velocity will actually register. So I'm going to put it right here on the 9. The hit frame is the same, but the hit frame does need an end date. It needs to know when to stop registering an attack. So if we move this, already here the punch is above his head. If a new enemy comes into close contact with him, there's no reason he should be hit, so we can safely assume that up until this point, from this point on, there is no need to register the attack as damage. Now the next frame is when the next combo move will be available for you to use, because if you just spam, if this stays 0, you can press these as fast as you want and it will just override the attack. The attack will still, it could happen, but it's still not very comfortable. So if I imagine it from timing, it's like you do one hit and then the next, it's kind of here when he's already like starting to crouch. So I'll go with the 0.5. We should be good enough. Now, we need to choose the animation from the list of animations we have. This is the melee uppercut. And now this is what we discussed in a previous update on Steam and now on Kickstarter, which I will have a link in the description of the video. We moved Buck's collision systems where we changed the way that he registers his damage output to work more like enemies. For instance, if I use, I'll show you in a minute. Let's just choose the collider. So now, Buck's animations and his attacks were always connected to colliders who were actually attached to the bones of his animation. These two. That happens sometimes. I hate it. I apologize. Voice cracking, god damn it. I had a lot of those in a previous video. So as you can see, the bones here, Emil, poor guy, had to actually calculate the data and use that to attach a collider to it, so you can, you know, designate the punch will be what actually hits the target. We found that to be a bit inconsistent. Sometimes attacks would miss. These kind of things can happen, especially when we have multiple enemies. So now what happens is that there's static colliders. So if we look at the melee close, which is what I just chose for the animation, you see this square here? This current square will represent any attack that I use. This is like the attack area. Any enemy that's inside this collision attack will register the damage that Buck dishes out. So this can be changed, but if I change that, it will work for all related attacks. So that way, any kind of balance or changes I want to do later on will not cause me to actually need to individually change certain parts of the collision systems. So you have the melee close, you have the melee far, which is for the kick and some of the guzzler attacks. You have the pistols, which have the same range exactly as before, but now they are pointing forward, and you're gonna have the the one going up and the one going down. Same thing for the shotgun. So now with that in mind, I chose the hitbox to be the melee close. I can choose whatever I want, but that's the one that works with this kind of attack. Audio list is what sound will play when the enemy receives the attack. So, for instance, further down the line, when we're planning to add planning to add more like particle effects, you know, so if an enemy gets hit, like it's the hyena, so if you want to do like spit coming out of his mouth, because why not? So we can do these kind of things. So it's going to be probably at work in a similar fashion that I can just select from a preset of factors of what actually happens to the character when they receive a kind of damage. So from this, like for instance a shotgun, I put like ricochets, so you can actually, you know, when you this is more of my fascination with sound design, but it's more, I think it becomes more believable and it feels better when you add a much more rich variety of attacks and sound effects that are related to it, because it just makes it feel more real. So if you punch somebody, you hear the punch sound effect. If it's the guzzler, you're gonna hear something metallic. If it's the shotgun, you're gonna hear like ricochets and like a kind of a vest being hit kind of a sound effect. So I'm trying to play around with all of these. It's been a lot of work just to try and, you know, get these going, get these right, but I think it's gonna be worth it at the end. Alright, so now the most important thing now is the trigger itself. What the sequence, what is the combo that you actually need to do to perform this kind of attack. So, this uppercut we're gonna do down and melee. Just a simple melee hit. So it's down and A on the keyboard, and it's down and another voice crack. And it's down and X on the Xbox controller. And just for testing it, to make Amir sweat if he's watching this right now, we're gonna try and add the new feature of actually copy and pasting attacks, which is very considerate of him to put this here for me, because it saves me a lot of time. And there you go. Control C, Control V. Amazing. I have the best programmer in the world. Oh, I will keep the attacks the same, just to see how it works, alright? But we'll keep it a bit What? No, alright, we'll keep it like that. Let's just add another one. And see what is the result. Save. Let's see if it's working in the test scene. And hopefully nothing will break. It's also important to... Alright, that seems to be working fine. Amir has changed a few things in the... He's done some refactoring with the code, and we're trying to balance out the loading times in a way, so when you first fire up the game, it's going to take maybe a bit longer, but it should shorten the in-game loadings by at least a second or two. And we're already kind of decent on the loading speed, so it's a good optimization change, which should hopefully hit in our upcoming patch. Which, depending on the release of this video, it's hard to work these things in the pipeline, so we'll see it's either live already or they broke something and we pushed it to another build. The loading is slow right now, it's because it's in the editor, and I'm recording with Bandicam, and it's kind of slowing my PC down a bit. So you're not seeing this at 60 frames per second, but at least you're seeing something. Let's see how the enemy reacts. This is a special kind of enemy that I use. Just give him a lot of HP so I can beat the shit out of him. As you can see, there's some inconsistencies with the animation, but I did notice something odd. You see the buck is moving forward, but if I'll do it from this point, he's moving backwards now. That's the velocity. It's not yet registering the correct facing direction of bucks, so it's only like towards one direction. We need to add that. So I'll write this down for Amir. But as you can see, the uppercut works fine. The damage connects in the right intervals. The animation issue is something to do with the way they register damage. We'll probably iron this out as quick as we can. And now, just because it became a bug and some of you guys asked for it to actually attack while jumping, this is something that's not supposed to work, but it does now. So we thought we might as well, you know, give it a shot. Maybe I'll animate something that Buck does while he's airborne. Maybe we can, you know, pull off some nice tricks. But it seems to be working. So as you saw, I did a melee combo using just a single attack. And because I don't want the game to be... Well, it's hard to say now because it's a bit early, but I don't want this to be like a juggling fest where you just knock up enemies constantly in the air. Because you will run out of stamina. So it's mostly about prioritizing targets. So what I'm going to do in the next video is that we're going to rebuild the melee combos as they were in the game, which means that if you played the demo or the early access version, you already know these combos. So it's going to be a bit tricky because I'm going to try and nail down the exact feel that these combos had. And try and replicate it and add some new attacks and see how it goes. So that was the introduction. And part 2, I'll show you the rest. Thanks for watching. See you next time.